Okay, hello everybody and welcome to our second plenary session for this 7th International Conference of the Spanish Association of Interdisciplinary India Studies. And today is our great honor to welcome poet, dancer, novelist, and just person to admire, Tishani Doshi with us. And it's been a dream coming true for the association to have you here, Tishani. Last year we had Prayak Akbar, the previous year we had Rohini Banerjee and Anuradha Roy, and you know that we have been chasing you, and you know, after your busy agenda, it's just a pleasure for us to have you here. For those of you who don't know Tishani, Tishani was a dancer. She was the lead dancer of the company founded by Chandralekha, by the famous Indian dancer. And she is also a poet and a writer of 2 novels so far. Her debut poetry collection, Countries of the World of the Body, won the Forward Prize. And she has published more poetry books, such as Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods, and recently A God at the Door. And she also wrote 2 novels, The Pleasure Seekers and Of Small Days and Nights. And she will be talking today in a conversation with Juan Ignacio Oliva Cruz, our former president and a professor at the Faculty of Humanities at Universidad de La Laguna, Tenerife, where he currently teaches post-colonial Anglophone literatures with an interest in environmentally aware texts. He has recently co-edited Revolving Around Indias and 2 monographs on eco-criticism in English studies. His trajectory as an academic, as well as a writer and translator, is vast. And for me, it's a privilege to welcome these 2 people who walk, look at themes, and commit this revolutionary act of telling poems. And this is what these 2 people with us today do. And the floor is all yours. Welcome, Tishani. Welcome, Juan Ignacio.
Thank you. Maybe we lost Juan again.
Yes, Juan Ignacio wanted to share his screen.
Thanks so much, Jorge. It's a pleasure. I really feel flattered. Yeah. Oh. If I can find it. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes.
I would like to start by reading my translation of Tishani Doshi's poem, Find the Poets. Busca los poetas. Llegué ayer a tierra extraña, una tierra que ha visto pesares. ¿Y quién no, por cierto? Esta tierra de casas blancas y limpias y mar azul, del que todo surgió. Y ahora parece que se esfumara. Quise encontrar la verdad. ¿Por qué una tierra tan grande permite que caigan las columnas y los organilleros se extingan? Busca a los poetas, dijo mi amiga. Si quieres saber la verdad, busca a los poetas. Amiga, ¿y dónde busco poetas? ¿En los campos de fútbol? ¿A la vera del agua? ¿En los bares bebiendo? ¿Dónde viven los poetas ahora? ¿Y sobre qué cosas cantan? Los busqué por el rastro y la estación de tren. Quizá uno de ellos me vendió unas sandalias, pero no habló conmigo de poesía, sino de sus luchas, de cómo su casa le fue arrebatada, de los peligros que sus hijos con arrojo deben enfrentar. Busca a los poetas, dijo mi amiga. No hablarán de lo que tú y yo hablamos, no hablarán de economía integrada ni de ajustes fiscales. No pueden decirte nada del peso de la adaptación. Pero a veces harán que te sientas para contarte que los poemas surgen en silencio y en ocasiones cuando más ruido se escucha, que aparecen como la lluvia abriendo los cielos sin esperarse. Hablarán de amor, claro está, como si fuese lo único que importa, de castaños y de picos de montañas y de cuánto extrañan a sus padres muertos. Hablarán como siempre han hecho durante siglos, agarrando por el cuello la vida hasta asfixiar ocasos y patrañas, y que quede solo la verdad desnuda. Los poetas, amiga, están donde siempre han estado, habitando casas de papel cerca de ríos y en bosques que se desvanecen. Y mientras tú y yo seguimos con la vida, recordando y olvidando, quedarán los poetas, cantando, cantando. So I think this is a good way. I don't know. Yeah, stop presenting. Yeah, perfect. This is a good way to start my conversation with Tishani Doshi, because I happened to meet her poems by Ratnakara Research Group because they had the project of a translation of Indian Ocean literature in general, and they gave me the opportunity of translating some poems by Tishani Doshi, and I was shocked, impressed, and absolutely loved the vis poetica that she shared with us, because it's a kind of peculiar. I can say that for me, I found a poet. If a poem is find the poets, I found a poet. So that's why when I received the invitation to have a conversation with her, I said yes, absolutely yes, please do. But I don't know if Tishani, and may I call you Tishani?
Yes, yes.
Tishani will want to have the conversation as far as I want to go, but it's upon her, and she will absolutely be free to do it. So Tishani, let's start.
Okay.
I wonder how, when, and why did you start writing or having the creative impulse in your life?
For me, it was in childhood, I think. I wrote because I think I was a very self-pitying child. I needed and wanted a lot of attention, and I'm a middle child. I'm in the middle of three, and I felt always very sensitive to the world and very awake to the world and very distracted by the world. And I felt all this feeling, and maybe I had no place to put it. And I thought, when my father would give me these old calendar books from his office, and when I felt a bit sort of alone, or a bit sad, or a bit like I wanted to have a special place that was mine, I would go to these books and write. And it was very, horrible, mawkish stuff. But I think there is a power of words and language by which we create our own world. And that began very early in childhood, by reading books. And then later on, it came through writing letters. I loved to write letters. I wrote many, and now I don't. And I feel like it's not just poems, it's sort of just the act of writing, whether it's in a, diaristic manner in a journal, or letters, or indeed going into something where there's a different relationship with audience. As I would say, now I'm publishing, so I have a different relationship. It's not just me writing over the garden wall, about, everything that I'm sort of angry about. But I think in some ways, it's also always been a way to channel and to feel that you have some power. So essentially, I see language as being very empowering in some way, for its ability to transform, for its ability to not just transform what you are writing about, but also to transform the reader. As readers, we have been transformed by other people's words. So this is a very exciting notion to me, and I think it began very early, and I continue to be amazed by language and how we change our relationship to it, and how we try to understand it and get close to it, and how we get frustrated by it. And that has been my life in so many ways.
Thank you. So I assume your first approach was with writing and not dancing, or they ran parallel?
Yeah, writing
I mean, the
first.
physical and the mental. They ran parallel in your artistic pose, or they are separated?
No, you know, I remember I have photographs of when I was maybe 3 years old, and it was my first dance performance. I was taking dance classes like a lot of young children in India do, and I was a flower uh, with few other with the flower petals, and then I remember in subsequent years I was a peacock, and then I was a prince, and these were kind of dance dramas. And you know, I've written this before, but it's, you know, I also grew up in the 80s, and my friends and I would very much love to dance to pop music, and with leg warmers and leotards, and, you know, Eye of the Tiger and ABBA and all of this. So I think, and then I was also very sporty. I did high jump, I swam. So I think my relationship with body has been very integral. But I would say that it's only later in my life that I came to recognize the power of body. I would say in my mid-20s, rather than recognizing much earlier the power of language. That seemed to me always very intuitive, very natural, my first vocabulary. And then the physical vocabulary of movement has been very strong, but I would say that came almost as if in the way that we all carry our bodies around, but we change our relationship to our bodies as we grow older, from when we were younger. And so we are not always aware of it, you know. And so sometimes I feel you're standing very close to your body, sometimes you're inside, sometimes you're very far. So that sort of understanding of body has been more, I would say, considered and taken longer time than this experiment with language, which is almost sort of compulsive and very natural for me.
Uh-huh. Can we find some about your dancing experience, or your experience with a body that has become even professional? Can we find this line in your creating your poetry, for example, or in your writings in general? Can we find this as a kind of, you know, motif?
Yes, I mean, I think it's not a surprise that I published my first book some years after I had become a dancer. So even though I was writing from when I was an undergraduate, and I was very serious about wanting to be a poet, not a novelist at that time, just a poet, it took many, many years. And in between, I had this encounter with Chandralekha, this choreographer who lived in Madras, or Chennai as it's now called. And I was 26 when I met her. And I then began this unexpected career in dance. And I always look at that point, and that's a magic age, actually, 26. It's also when Rilke was in Paris and he met Rodin. And I think also that somehow openness to life, looking for some kind of teacher direction, you're willing to change your life. You just don't know how you're going to do it, you know. And so I think I was very lucky to have met this guru, this friend, and who recognized something in me that I did not see in myself. And I think that the experience of dance affected my language, because it taught me a great discipline. I was also very interested suddenly in this question of inner and outer. How do we use the body to connect to the outside society, to an idea of cosmos? I was really also working with somebody who had been in her dance work looking at some very abstract and wonderful Indian concepts. So for me, I think all of that trickled in, and it was trying to see how can language also become more muscly, and how can it become leaner, and how can we how can we create jumps and rhythm? And I think essentially the two big areas where language and movement overlap is also this question of time. And that is something that I actually find very difficult to articulate. But I think as a dancer, you are always dealing with this notion of time in the body, held in the body. And as a writer, whether you're a novelist or whether you're a poet, you are always playing with time. You are either universe building. The poem is small, but it's encompassing so much. And how do you make narrative leaps, and how do you have a sense of stillness and movement? And so I think in a way those became very much my obsessions as a writer, but they came from my work as a dancer, of sort of saying, how do we hold ourselves and find our place in the world, so I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely.
But anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Very interesting, because I am a musician, and yeah, music is like an architecture on air. So it serves for pace making, for rhythm, etc., and for novels, of course, no?
Yeah.
So you started writing letters and poems at the beginning, but then how did you enter the world of narrative, of novels, novel making? Because novel making involves a lot of other facets. Maybe because you were a journalist as well.
I wrote some articles for newspapers, but I've never worked as a journalist that I go to an office and I'm a reporter. I would find that extremely difficult to do. I do a lot of, I like to take time with writing. But I think it was more a question of, again, a sense of scale and feeling that I wanted to tell this story with my first novel, The Pleasure Seekers. And it could not be a short story, and it could not be a poem. And it was a narrative with characters, and it spanned 3 generations. And so, in a way, it was sort of like demanding to be a novel. I think when I was in graduate school, there was how do you call it, when from publishing houses they send somebody to scouts came, and I think Arundhati Roy had just published God of Small Things, and they were all looking for the next Arundhati Roy, and he said, well, you're writing poetry, why don't you write a novel? And I was so irritated. I said, it's not like you can just switch the tap and suddenly go from poetry to fiction, although having said that, I think that a lot of the writers that I really love have moved from poetry and fiction and go between these worlds. So it's easier to go from poetry to fiction than say from, I don't know so many people who started to write fiction and then went to poetry. So you see what I mean? It feels like it could be a natural progression from poetry to extend out, feeling maybe slightly more ambitious, that you could go into this larger canvas of the novel. And I still, I've written these 2 novels, and I've also written a small novella. And I feel with fiction a very different relationship when I am working on a novel, and it's quite stressful in a way that poems are not, because I think exactly this question of time, that you have to stay in the time of the novel for so long, and it means a kind of retreating from the world that I'm often reluctant to do. So yeah.
Thank you. So as a proof that you cross borders between poems, short stories, non-fiction, you have The Adulterous Citizen book, for example, published in 2015. Can you tell me, is this a proof of what you were saying now? This
I think, yeah. Well, it comes from a line by a writer who I really like, Suketu Mehta, an Indian writer who wrote a book called Maximum City. And the line goes, I feel like I'm an adulterous resident. I think he uses the word resident. I use citizen. But he says, you're in one street in one city, and then you're thinking of the other, and I feel, I also have a collection of poems called Everything Begins Elsewhere. And that notion of elsewhere and that notion of betweenness is something I have felt a lot in my life. And I think a lot of people feel it. Uh, for me, it came from the fact that I come from a sort of multiracial family background, growing up in a very conservative Indian city. So being made to feel one's outsiderness at a very young age and being intrigued by it, but also maybe somewhat, just trying to become at ease with it. And then later on, I suppose now we are living in an age of such movement. And I think our sense of belonging, our sense of notions of home and identity are as great as questions as they have ever been. So for me, definitely, I feel like I am happy to have, as an artist, many approaches to these questions, not just poems and not just essays, but novels. And I feel like it's a moment where everything is having a dialogue with each other. And I feel like that is my true personality, not to be kept into one box or the other.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like your poems, because you are very poetic, but at the same time, you're absolutely aware of the environment and of the injustices of the situation, like a journalist. You have the journalist side, in which you treat things like gender violence in girls coming out of the woods, for example. But at the same time, you can sit and listen to nature and use lots of metaphors with birds and trees, etc. And my question is, how do you mingle the dirty reality we live in with the vis poetica, such lovely vis poetica that you have with intense lyricism in your poems or in your writings in general?
I think that, like a lot of people, I feel a sense of being overwhelmed by by news. I would say by being alive in a moment where we are in this age of information, where we are being bombarded with so many things, where there is so much violence, where there is sort of imminent environmental collapse, and just there's so much to be brutalization. And I think the question for me is how to respond to it, and whether it's about writing a kind of news article where you're trying to explain something, or whether you're going to try to go out of time and to make something like a poem which has the quality of lyric. So even though the poem is tied to a particular time, it can transcend that time and it can speak hopefully for a longer time, and I think I'm really interested in that quality of poetry. I read, Marina Tsvetaeva has this beautiful essay about poets and time. And she says that poets should create their own time. So it's not about reflecting time, but making time. And I really like that idea. So even though I am bound by the time that I am alive in, and these are the situations and these are the issues that I'm interested in, particularly, as you mentioned, environment and gender violence and other things, I feel like it cannot be propaganda writing. It cannot be a kind of rant. It has to be about this question of what is the transformatory power of poetry, in that it takes all of this and converts it into something else, and that something else is a way for us to reclaim and to restore almost what is lacking. And so, of course, poetry is not going to change in the grand sense of things any kind of legislature. It's not going to make those kind of big changes in society. And that's not the job of the poet, but it is something that has a tremendous power to affect one other person, maybe two other people, three other people. How do I know that Find the Poets is going to land with you, for instance, all the way across where you are? I mean, when I write the poem, I write it, and to me, that is the greatness of poetry, is that the very optimism of poetry, that to write itself is an optimistic act, and so that is very reassuring in a moment where there is so much to be anxious and pessimistic about. That as long as we are singing and singing, then we are still alive and we are still here and we are trying to stand for something else, and yeah, we add our voice to the voices of others. So it's a strange balance, because I think most writers, most artists are always struck by sort of existential angst at some point. What is the point? Who is listening? Why are we doing this? And that's become now for me, I think, a perfectly normal situation where I think it's good to ask yourself that, and it's good to recalibrate, and it's good to think, why am I doing this? What is it for? And then in any case, you keep doing it, because if you had to think about doing it, it's not a real logical choice. So you do it because you have a compulsion to. And so so I think I am now comfortable with those uncertainties and this strange pull and push of existential angst, and then finding some reclamatory powers through language.
Thank you. Yes, I'm thinking of, Ode to Patrick Swayze or Girls Coming Out of the Woods, etc. I'm thinking of the environment, because the woods are very important in the poem. The wounded animal that is compared to the protagonist in Ode to Patrick Swayze, the oaks in the poem that you wrote, you published in a web, I don't remember now the name, but the oaks there. So the environment, how it affects the poetic force or the plot in your poems, in your writings.
So, I mean, the woods are so potent, aren't they? And in every culture, every civilization, I think. So even the word woods is sort of, for me, it's sort of almost like I think of Dante and I think of the woods. And then in India, in the myths, we have forest where people are exiled, and that it's again that space of transformation. If you look at fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, things happen in the woods, in the forest. And trees are also these sort of, on one hand, almost have these magical qualities. And also, you don't want to be stuck in a jungle alone at night because you will be scared. So I think of nature ultimately as not a monodimensional great force, Mother Earth idea. I think of it as the fact more that as human beings, we are very strange in thinking ourselves separate from nature, and that we are always thinking of ourselves as exiled, and that we are always thinking of ourselves as standing outside and observing that which is nature, because we are not that. And I have been reading these old ancient Tamil poems from the Sangam period. These poems are 1500 to 2000 years old. And these are, I would say, one of the first eco-poetry. They're love poems, but they are about connecting the inside with the outside. So they have, first of all, mapped the whole environment. There is the coastal, there is the forest, there is the wasteland, there is the pasture land, and each place is for a different stage of love. And each place has its own soil, its own birds, its own animals, its God, all of, like, it's a stunning idea of thinking about how we might combine our emotional zones with the environment, and how our inner self is part of what we inhabit. And I think that is an extraordinary poetic practice that existed in the landscape that I now live in, and that I feel we're quite far from, because I think most of us feel very alienated from our landscapes. That we can't name trees, birds, whatever. I moved out of the city maybe 10 years ago, and now I feel like I am obsessed with birds. I never thought about birds in my whole life except for crows, which I would see in the city, or something like that. And now I every poem has a bird in it. Like, what's going on? What's with these birds? They're just very Hitchcocky, and the birds are coming for me, but I think it's partly to do with ideas of wanting to connect. I think as humans, we feel always this need to connect, but we somehow, there's something in us that is separating us. And I suppose, again, art and all of the methods that we have, which is uniquely human, which is our ability to create these beautiful things, whether they are the cave paintings or little objects, like these little things to say, I was here, I was alive, here's my little poem, here's my little, small hippopotamus or whatever. I think it's a remarkable instinct, but it does reflect that essentially we see ourselves separate from nature. And so all of what we are doing is trying to reconcile that, is this distance that we feel, and yet we want to feel embraced. And now if we look at it with regard to climate change, with regard to what is actually happening to the planet, it feels more urgent than ever to try to understand, one, where does our violence come from towards each other and towards the planet? But two, what is this thing that makes us feel separate? And why can we not understand that by harming this, we are harming ourselves? Seems to not be something that we understand. So I'm really interested in those ideas. And I think that inevitably it comes into your work as these are your obsessions. And so they just seep in,
Yeah, the poem I wanted to mention before was Every Unbearable Thing, because I forgot the title, but now I remember. Yes, but at the same time, you have a lot of, you have an ironic tone underlying many texts. I'm thinking, for example, the Ode to Patrick Swayze, and the ironic tone is very important because it complements the romantic or the lyrical side. What's the importance of irony for you in your production?
It's important because I think as artists, we are serious people in a way, and it's good to be serious. If you're not serious about what you're doing, it doesn't happen, because nobody else cares about it, only you. So you have to be serious. But I think for me, I guess my vision of the world is a particular one, and it is absurdist. And it is about, on one hand, liking the idea of this very holistic concept, and these ideas of beauty and joy and love and these really strong ideas, which I do believe in. But then also kind of understanding that, as human beings, we are very odd and we are quite horrible also. And how to then combine these things. And you brought up music earlier, and I should say that I worked with wonderful musicians in my life, and I learned a lot from them. And partly it's also to do with the idea of tempo and pitch. You can't keep on your poem at this shrill high note of disaster,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. And so I feel like the best plays are the ones where you're laughing in 1 minute and crying in the next. And, rather than the straight out just tragedy or the straight out just comedy, it's always this idea that I've been interested in, that if you can be funny or ironic or switch tone as you write about difficult things like violence, for instance, then it gives it more power, and it has some sense of texture to it. So it's not like I decide that, oh, it needs a line. That's just how the tone developed. It's just that it's my own reflex of developing my voice, which has changed. I would say that in earlier work, that tone is not so present, and it's sort of been picked up gradually as I sort of begin to figure out how I can bear all these things, that I am sort of obsessed with. So I think for me, it's very important, and I definitely enjoy writers who have that quality. So I look for that change of tempo and pitch and a mix of all these textures as a reader.
And probably what makes the poem better is the mixture, because it's only lyrical. It won't have the strength of irony. If it's only social, then it won't have that part that complements the other, like a yin and yang. Okay, I think we need time for some reading at the end, but I will just ask a couple of last questions. You said you were grown in a kind of interracial family. I read that you have your father is from Gujarat and your mother is from Wales. And you write lots of things about families with a lot of irony. Again, like in Pleasure Seekers or in other parts, about multiracial families, or about the crossing between cultures. And can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, family is an inescapable subject for a writer. I don't think anybody can escape it. And I can't remember who said it, but one of the American novelists, about how you're basically screwed if you have a writer in the family, because you will get written about in some way, And I think for me, the family is also a very powerful idea. In India, it's almost to the point of being, and perhaps as well in Spain in certain parts, but this idea of the family unit as being the most important thing, while it's a source of comfort and it's a wonderful idea, I know it's also personally quite oppressive for a lot of people. And there's also a need to escape from the family in order to find oneself. So I've always been interested in notions of family. And increasingly, I'm also, as I would say in my second book, I'm also interested in the idea of what does it mean to make your family, to have an alternative family. I decided that I didn't want to have children, which is something for 10 years of my life I had to answer questions about this, which was so irritating but that's how it is. You get asked, then you have to explain, blah, blah, blah. And then I think this idea of motherhood is also very enshrined in India, particularly. And I thought, are we moving into a society where, first of all, so much about gender and expectation and role is being changed? And why are we so fixated on the idea of blood and DNA? Are we not able to create important bonds of love with other people who are not related to us? Can we not imagine alternate family structures? And are our most spiritual experiences only with something that happens to have our blood? Doesn't that limit us in some way? Not to take away from family, because like I said, I actually come from a wonderful family, and my first novel was a love letter to my parents because they have a beautiful relationship. And I wanted to celebrate that because it was sort of an unlikely coming together. But I think I look at the unit of family, I would say, with everything else, not in a one-dimensional, oh, it's great and it's wonderful, but to say like actually, and not just my experience of it, but how has family worked in society as a force of good and as a force of really holding people back. You know, we were talking about gender. I would say that most women experience a form of violence or abuse within the family structure. So the idea that the family is above this or it is completely benevolent is also a false one. So I think in a way, I'm always trying to examine things as keenly as possible. And I would say that I'm not looking to take down things or to sort of take a especially contrarian position. But I'm also trying to see, is it possible, which is, I would say, a feminist idea, is it possible to reimagine our societies in a different way? And what could be these new structures and how can we imagine them, given that we have these very imposing structures that we live in? So it's about imagination, and I think that, you know, that is the foremost quality for a writer is the imagination.
Thank you, Tishani. My last question is easy or difficult? You said you're going to publish something soon, but what is what you like more now to do? Poetry, a new novel? What do you have in mind for the future?
Oh,
The near future?
so yeah, I'm always writing poems. The poems are happening just one by one here, and then eventually they become a book. So that's not like a project as such. I'm not in the headspace for a novel. Right now I'm teaching at NYU in Abu Dhabi, so that's why I'm here. So I'm not writing anything, I'm just teaching. I'm reading my students' work. But I think what I would like to write, I have an idea, but I don't know how to structure it, which would be a kind of essays or memoir, or at any rate, nonfiction about some idea about body and dance and about my relationship with Chandralekha. And I think I don't know how to approach it, but I feel that's it. It has been many years now since she died, and as each year goes by, I feel further and further from it, and I feel like now is the time to write it. So, but we'll see. And you know, it would be wonderful to write another novel soon, because that's such a special, crazy energy of creativity to be at work in that, you know, thing. But there's absolutely zero ideas in my bucket at the moment. So we'll have to see.
Oh, it would be wonderful to read it if it comes to fruition. Yes, please do. Yeah, but we have a lot of pressure now. Every day there are pressures. And if you're in the academic, if you're teaching and you're trying to finish the semester, it gets very complicated. Thank you so much, Tishani. It's been lovely. It has been a pleasure to converse with you. I mean, you're so easy. I mean, a conversation is like spontaneous and easy. I think it's very easy. Like I really admire you as a person and your production, of course. Admire to a level. Yes. We want to finish. Tishani and I want to finish with reading some of her production, and it's Tishani to decide. I said I wanted to have girls coming out of the wood or Ode to Patrick Swayze because of the irony, because of some things, but it's up to you. You read whatever you want, and then if we have time, we can finish with the poems, but it depends on you.
Sure. Well, I think I first have to ask, does everybody know who Patrick Swayze is? Show of hands.
Very famous. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you never know. I think it's a generational thing, because I remember reading this poem in a sort of, I don't know, a small little bar in Malaysia somewhere. And very young people, they had no idea who he was. So I thought, oh, all the references of this poem is going to be lost. Maybe it needs to be, I don't know who the young Patrick Swayze is, but anyway, okay, I'll read that one. Yeah. Perfect. So this is Ode to Patrick Swayze. At 14, I wanted to devour you, the twang, the strut, the perfect proletarian butt in the black pants of you. I wanted a man like you to sashay into town and teach me how to be an aeroplane in water. I didn't want to be a baby. I wanted to be your baby. I wanted revenge. I wanted to sue my breasts for not living up to potential. I wanted Jennifer Grey to meet with an unfortunate end and not have a love affair with a ghost. At 14, I believe you'd given birth to the word preternatural. And when mother came home one day, waving her walking shoes, saying, I lost my soul in the Theosophical Society, I wanted to dance as recklessly as the underside of that shoe. I wanted to be a pebble in the soft heel of you, to horse whisper and live on a ranch in Texas and love my blonde wife forever and have creases around my eyes and experience at least one goddamn summer where I could be like the wind, sexy and untrammeled and dirty. And it was only after I found my own Johnny and got rid of him. Only yesterday, when I rescued a northern shoveler from crows on the beach, his broken wing squished against the crockery of my ribs. Only after setting him down at the edge of a canal where he sank into the long, patient task of dying, that I realized what I'd wanted most was to be held by someone determined to save me, someone against whom I could press my unflourishing chest, who would offer me not just the time of my life, but who tear out reams of his yellowing pancreas and say, here, baby, eat.
The end is fantastic. The
It
end
kind
is
of,
something, wow.
it sort of is like where your PhD level with Patrick Swayze studies is, because he died of pancreatic cancer, and so only diehards will get all the coded information in the poem. But yeah,
but you know, there is a lot of mythological also repercussions or echoes of mythology of cannibal, this kind of mythological cannibalism, etc. Pancreas, where the sweetness lies, etc. So it's fantastic. Shall I read my translation into Spanish?
Sure, I'd love to hear it.
Oda a Patrick Swayze. A los 14 quise comerte enterito, tu nasalidad, tu contoneo, tu perfecto culo obrero, enfundado en unos vaqueros negros. Quise un hombre que se pavonease por la ciudad y me enseñara cómo ser un avión en el agua. No quería ser una niña, quería ser tu niña. Quería venganza. Quería querellarme contra mis pechos por no hacer valer todo su esplendor. Quería que Jennifer Grey tuviera un infausto final y no un encuentro amoroso con un espíritu. A los 14, creí que lo sobrenatural lo habías creado tú. Y cuando mamá llegó a casa un día taconeando y diciendo, perdí mi alma en la sociedad teosófica, quise bailar frenéticamente como la punta de sus tacones. Quise ser un guijarro bajo su suela blanda, susurrar a los caballos en un rancho tejano y amar sin medida a una esposa rubia y tener arruguitas en los ojos y al menos por un verano sentir que podía ser como el viento, sexy, incontrolable y obscena. No fue hasta que encontré a mi Johnny y me libré de él, ayer tan solo, que libré a un pato norteño de los cuervos de la playa, con el ala rota apretada sobre mi costillar crujiente, solo cuando lo deposité al borde del canal, abstraído en su proceso lento y sosegado de morir, entonces me di cuenta que lo que más quería era caer rendida en brazos de alguien que quisiera salvarme y posar sobre él mi pecho no florecido. Y no que me ofreciera la mejor época de mi vida, sino que cortara en rodajas su páncreas amarillento y me dijera, toma, nena, come.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know how it sounds. Because do you understand a bit of Spanish or something?
Just a few words here and there, but I was in, so sexy is sexy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Can we
okay.
read Girls Coming Out of the Woods?
Yeah, of course.
This
Of
is
course.
a manifesto about you know, the awakening of women. I don't know. It's kind of epic. Has an epic tone in a sense, and talks about
Yeah.
ghosts and nature and.
Yeah, this
I don't know.
poem really came out as a kind of like a anthem, like chanting kind of quality. I don't know how it just came out in that way. So yeah, it was written soon after the Nirbhaya incident in India, which is when this woman Jyoti Singh was raped on a bus in Delhi and then subsequently died. And it really felt like a moment of a real rip in our society where we could maybe talk about violence against women and that perhaps things might change. But since that incident, so many more horrible things have happened. And this poem, unfortunately, remains relevant. And so, yeah, I will read it. Girls are coming out of the woods. Girls are coming out of the woods, wrapped in cloaks and hoods, carrying iron bars and candles and a multitude of scars collected on acres of premature grass and city buses, in temples and bars. Girls are coming out of the woods with panties tied around their lips, making such a noise it's impossible to hear. Is the world speaking too? Is it really asking? What does it mean to give someone a proper resting? Girls are coming out of the woods, lifting their broken legs high, leaking secrets from unfastened thighs, all the lies whispered by strangers and swimming coaches and uncles, especially uncles who said spreading would be light and easy, who put bullets in their chests and fed their pretty faces to fire, who sucked the mud clean off their ribs and decorated their coffins with briar. Girls are coming out of the woods, clearing a ground to scatter their stories. Even those girls found naked in ditches and wells, those forgotten in neglected attics and buried in riverbeds like sediments from a different century. They've crawled their way out from behind the curtains of childhood, the silver pink weight of their bodies pushing against water, against the sad, feathered tarnish of remembrance. Girls are coming out of the woods the way birds arrive at morning windows, pecking and humming, until all you can hear is the smash of their minuscule hearts against glass, the bright desperation of sound, bashing, disappearing. Girls are coming out of the woods. They're coming. They're coming.
Salen las chicas del bosque, embosadas con capuchas, portando candiles y barras de acero, llenas de cicatrices, hechas en campos de hierba temprana y autobuses de ciudad, en templos y bares. Salen las chicas del bosque, los panties ciñendo los labios, haciendo ruidos extraños, apenas audibles. ¿Acaso el mundo responde? Tal vez dijesen, ¿qué habría que hacer para tener un reposo digno? Las chicas salen del bosque, alzando al cielo sus piernas rotas, exudando secretos por los muslos sueltos, todos los bulos dichos al oído por extraños y monitores de natación, y tíos, sí, sobre todo los tíos, cuando dicen qué fácil soltarlos y que crezcan. Esos que plantan balas en el pecho y hacen arder sus caras bonitas, que lamen hasta limpiar el lodo de sus costillas y adornan con brezos sus ataúdes. Salen las chicas del bosque, allanando el terreno para esparcir historias, aquellas incluso que yacen desnudas en zanjas y pozos, o las olvidadas en áticos viejos, y las enterradas en lechos fluviales como sedimentos de un siglo distinto. Se han abierto paso entre las cortinas de su infancia, el peso rosáceo plateado de sus cuerpos que pugnan en el agua, contra la pátina triste y plumosa del recuerdo. Salen las chicas del bosque como las aves arriban a las ventanas de la mañana, picoteando y cantando, hasta que lo único que se oye son sus corazones diminutos que explotan contra el cristal. El desespero brillante, sonoro, latiendo desaparece. Salen las chicas del bosque. Ya llegan, ya llegan. Wow, this is fantastic. It puts my hair on end. Tishani, can we finish with buffaloes? Because
Sure.
it's a short poem, but for me it's an example of the Tishani that is environmentally aware, Tishani that talks of animals as if they were archetypes of a big nature with capital letters.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a small poem.
Yep.
But I think you're right. It has that largeness in it, and it's from my book Everything Begins Elsewhere. Buffaloes, impossible to imagine. Buffaloes, a dream of them. Coats thick with rain, bodies like continents, a whole world thundering through Indian laburnum. Think of beginnings, amusement parks at dawn, pianos, bedrooms, gods. Think of all the invisible insurrection it takes to wake a city from slumber. In these woods, a single man will do, armed with a stick and a paltry collection of stones. When I see buffaloes run, I think of love, how it is held in the meaty pink of the tongue, how quickly it is beaten from us, all that brute resolve disappearing in the undergrowth.
Búfalos. Imposible imaginarlos. Búfalos. Sueño con ellos. Pelajes empapados de lluvia. Masas como continentes. Un mundo entero truena por el laburo indígena. Piensa en los orígenes. Ferias al amanecer, pianos, alcobas, dioses. Piensa cuántas invisibles insurrecciones hacen falta para despertar a la ciudad de su letargo. Entre los árboles, solo, un hombre se las ingenia con un palo y un puñado de piedrecillas. Cuando veo correr los búfalos, pienso en el amor, cómo se sostiene en el carnoso músculo rosáceo de la lengua, cuán rápido se nos aleja apaleado, toda esa bruta firmeza desvaneciéndose por la maleza. And they are extinct. Now, it's Tishani, so we can finish this session now with buffaloes and with the sweetness and bitter sweetness of the 3 poems we have read in 2 versions, in English and Spanish. Really, it has been, for me, it has been a personal pleasure to talk with you. And you are, for me, you're a discovery. I confess I didn't know you before, but now you're absolutely with me. You're in my reading list forever. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to talk and to hear the poems in Spanish, and yeah, to be able to have this conversation in these different time zones and places where we are. And it was really nice to share it with you all as well. Thank you to both ones, so, and Jorge as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tishani, and thank you, Juan Ignacio, for having taken us elsewhere, no? You have taken everybody to a place where we were able to breathe slowly, to reconsider slowly, and reconcile ourselves slowly. It's a dream for all of us, Tishani, to have you here, to have your echo forever, you know, in the association. And, you know, there are MA students, there are very respected professors, and everybody's just writing their reviews on the comments with questions that I'm afraid we cannot take. But you are, you know, with us now in the reading list. And as you were saying, nobody can escape from families. Nobody can escape from poetry. Nobody can escape from the poets, you and Juan Ignacio. And now nobody can escape from you. And that commitment that holistically you share and light up. So thank you, Tishani. It's been a true honor, honestly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So kind. And hopefully we meet in person one
Yes,
day.
this is really extraordinary. Yes. Please, I forgot. I was carried out by the metaphor. I was carried out. Please, let's make this echo happen in reality, and we can hug the whole complement of bodies, physical, mental, and spiritual, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Deal. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Tishani.
so much.
Thank you, Tishani.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Okay, so now.